If you are falling short of your potential because you're not consistently following through on the things that you know that you need to do, then this video is for you. I was inspired to do this because I recently completed my 600th podcast episode. I started my podcast 3 years ago, and I decided to do a podcast every single day for a year to just master the art of consistency, to find my voice, and to just get better. And what I want to do is I want to share these 6 things with you so that you can become an absolute machine when it comes to consistency. So first of all, like, why is that important? Well, whatever your goal is, if it's trying to perform better at work, if it's trying to build an exercise habit, if it's trying to complete an endurance event, consistency is required. The types of goals that you and I are going after, these are big goals. These are long-term pursuits, and success doesn't happen overnight. So what that means is you need to be disciplined, you need to be consistent, and you need to show up day after day, week after week, month after month. But you know that this isn't an easy thing. This is something that needs to be built up over time. And so that's why I want to teach you these 6 different things. So if we haven't met yet, my name is Mario Minertz. I'm a performance coach, endurance athlete, and entrepreneur, and I help people like you, professionals, build the endurance and apply that to their personal and professional lives so that they can ultimately reach their full potential. And definitely excited to dive in for today. And again, these are the six things that you can learn to become an absolute master when it comes to consistency. So let's dive in with the first one. The first one is you have to want it. Okay. It might not be what you thought we were going to start with, but when it comes to like what you are trying to do, if you're trying to increase your performance at work, if you're in sales, if you're in trading, if you're an entrepreneur, like, you need to first think about, why do I want this? Because it's a lot easier to follow through and be consistent with something that you actually care about. And this might not be what you thought we were going to start with, but it's actually one of the higher, like, most important things to think about. Because a lot of times when we start a goal, we think a lot about like why we want it at the very beginning. But once we're in it, we kind of forget the higher level reason and the motivation of why we got started in the first place. So the first thing to think about is, like, when it comes to what you're doing, why do you want it? Like, what is the emotional connection that you have to it? Another thing to think about is, who is going to benefit from you achieving or pursuing this goal? It's not just about you. It's likely the people around you. It could be your team at work. It could be your wife. It could be your kids, your family members. A lot of times thinking about why do you want it can actually help you follow through on it in the first place. So for me, when it came to creating content and starting my podcast, my why was like, I felt like it was my calling. I feel like it is really like why I was created, to do what I'm doing right now and to put myself in hard, challenging situations and to become the best version of myself and then teach what I'm learning to the people around me. I just really feel like that's why I was created. I have always had a deep passion for coaching, and I had this curiosity around podcasts. I was just diving into all of these different podcasts, and I reached a point where in order for me to grow, I needed to not just consume, I needed to actually create something and share with other people. So for you, when it comes to like, what your goal is, like, why do you want it? First thing, if you want it, it's going to be a lot easier for you to follow through on it. And the next thing, once you know kind of why you want it, it's really important for you to set the frequency of your habit, of whatever it is that you're trying to do, and commit. So that's the second thing, set the frequency and commit. And when I was first starting to create content and create my podcast, I came across the book, which is called The Practice by Seth Godin. And it was the perfect book at the perfect time. And really what it talks about is it talks about ways to enhance your creativity and like boost your innovation skills, update your creative process, but doing that thing by actually shipping and producing work on a daily basis. So he encourages you like to not think about creativity as like a trait, but more so as a skill. And you don't actually become creative and more creative until you use that skill more frequently. So it basically taught me if I really wanted to become more creative, I was going to need to ship every single day. I was going to need to put something out there every single day. And so that's what I did, is I created a podcast every single day based off of something that I was on my mind, something that was on my heart, something I was learning, a conversation that I had with clients, and I just consistently put that out there. So for you, when it comes to being consistent, the first thing that you need to think about is, how frequently do I want to follow through on this thing? If it's meditation, is that a daily thing? Is it a Monday through Friday thing? Is it just on the weekends? Like, once you set the frequency, that's when you commit to following through on it. So it's like, what's my goal? Why do I want it? What's the frequency? And then just committing and following through. So those are the first two. The third thing is one of the most important ones with consistency, and that's to be consistent, you need to track your habits. To be consistent, you need to track your habits. And so what I mean by that is, if you're trying to follow through on something and you know how frequently you want to do it, you need to actually use something like a habit tracker to know if you have completed it. So when I was first doing this podcast, what I would do is I would use an app called the Streaks app, and I was doing it every single day. And I remember that there were times when I didn't want to do a podcast, but every single time I would do it, right after I would do the podcast, I would open up the app and I would just hold my finger down to check off that day that I had completed the activity. And it felt amazing to just like check the box for the day. And I don't know if you are like wired like me, but I just love to like get things done. I love to check things off of my list. It's just the achiever like mindset in me. And so like the reason why it's important to have something like this is it allows you to have a reward for the activity that you're doing. So the reward of just checking the box some days was just a weird like mental thing that got me through it, that got me able to complete the task for the day. So that's the first reason why you want to track it. The second reason is you need to be held accountable in some way. Yes, you can ask somebody, you can tell them that you're going to do it and ask them to hold you accountable, but it's best to hold yourself accountable. And the best way to do that is just to tangibly see on a calendar, through an app, through some sort of visual progress, if you have completed it and how many times over the past day or over the past week or over the past month. Because if you aren't writing it down, a lot of times we'll lie to ourselves and think that we're doing better than we actually are. And that's why I like having something to actually track if you're doing it or not. So I mentioned the Streaks app. That's one app that's really good for this. Another one is called Habit Share. I use this with all of my one-on-one coaching clients, have them download their top habits and set the frequency and follow through. This is one of the best things that you can do to be more consistent. So that's 3 of them. We're going to number 4. Number 4 is what I call break down your process. So when it comes to being consistent with something, a lot of times you may have like a really big goal. And what you need to do in terms of that is to break it down into the smaller, more tangible steps. So when it came to creating content and creating my podcast, I needed to break that down into what are the things that need to happen in order to record a podcast. I started breaking it down into coming up with an idea, writing out the idea and preparing it, actually recording it and doing what I'm doing now. Then there's some editing and coming up with the title. And then there's the actual process of publishing or scheduling. So breaking down, record a podcast or start a podcast to those 5 tangible steps helped me to become more consistent with the activities that were leading to the bigger result. So it might make sense in that podcasting example, but when it comes to your goal, what are the activities that lead to you being able to complete that thing? And how can you break down your process? When it comes to like running for a marathon or just the act of running, there's things that need to happen before and during and after. You need to lay your clothes out. You need to put on your gear. You need to know like what your workout is. You need to prepare some nutrition. You need to complete the run, and then you need to refuel. And the thing that I want you to understand is when you know what to do, it's so much easier like to follow through on that activity. So that is the fourth one, is to break down your process. The fifth one is more of like a mindset shift when it comes to consistency, because I see this mistake all the time. And I want you to understand that consistency does not mean perfection. Because a lot of times, if I were to ask you what your habits are and if you're consistent, a lot of times people say that they're not consistent. And when I ask them, what does that mean? They tell me that they don't do it every day. But the reality is that you aren't perfect. I'm not perfect. That means that we're not going to follow through every single day. And if that's the case, then what does consistency actually mean? When I think about consistency, I don't think about it in terms of days. I think about it in terms of weeks, months, years, and decades. And with the types of goals that we're going after, like we're really thinking long term. I'm thinking about how can I get a little bit closer to that future version of me? How can I build a sustainable business that's going to last? In order to do that, I can't just think about the days. I need to think about the weeks, months, years, and decades. And so instead of shooting for 100%, most of the time I aim for 80% consistency on a weekly basis. And if I am completing 80% of my habits on a weekly basis, I consider that a win. And I know that if I stick with it over time, that is going to lead to a lasting, meaningful change. So I really want you to understand that consistency does not mean perfection. So that's number 5. Last one is connected to this idea of consistency doesn't mean perfection, is there are going to be days when you're going to slip up. And the decision that you make on the days when you slip up is one of the most important decisions that you'll make, because I want you to understand that you need to master the restart in order to be consistent. So what do I mean by that? So a lot of people fall into this idea and this mentality that it's either all or nothing. I either do 100% of the time or I don't do it at all. But the reality is there's going to be days like that 20% of the time, like I mentioned, where you're just not going to follow through on the thing that you said that you were going to do, or you meant to do it, but something came up. So what do you do the following day? Do you just give up completely, or do you master the restart and start a new streak? So this is where it's really important to think long-term, to follow through, and to master that restart to be consistent, not on a daily basis, weekly, monthly, yearly, and from a decades perspective. And just really be aware of that all or nothing trap. So those were the 6 keys to consistency. Just to recap, number 1 is you got to want it. You really got to think about like, what is your goal and why is it important to you and who's going to benefit. The next thing is you need to set the frequency. How often are you going to do it? And you need to commit to that. Just really like set that in stone that that's something that you're going to follow through on. Number 3 is to be consistent. You need to track your habits. You need to track if you're doing it and how frequently. Number 4, you got to break down the process, take the bigger goal, break it down into all of the steps that need to happen in order to be successful. Number 5, realize that consistency does not mean perfection. So we're not going for 100% here. We're thinking long term. And number 6, you need to master the restart. On the days when you slip up, you've got to restart, you got to follow through and get back up. So those are the 6 keys. If you are a professional and you're looking to master your mindset and your consistency to help you perform better, think better, and ultimately like reach your potential, and you're looking for help with that, send me a DM or book a call below, and we'll do a free coaching call where I'll try and understand what are your goals, what are your habits, what's getting in the way, and we'll likely work on one of these 6 things to help you ultimately become a machine of consistency. So that's what I have for today. Until next time, I'll see you in the next one.